Okay, and we are looking at a new Torah portion, special for this week. It's Parashat Terumah. It begins in Exodus chapter 25, and it goes till chapter 27. And hold on a second, let me just, in the middle of chapter 27. And this is now the beginning of the whole last part of the book of Exodus. Then all the Torah portions from now on will be dealing with the same topic. And the topic is creating a Mishkan, creating a dwelling place for God amidst the children of Israel. And it'll deal with this topic again and again and again, bringing up the same issues, but it starts off here and opens up with the idea, if we have the Eitz Chaim, it's on page 485. With the idea of what is it all about. And the English translation has the comments say at the top there, the Tabernacle, part 1, instructions. Okay, and that's going to go from our Torah portion through to a number of chapters later, 31:17. So a lot of instructions. And basically that's the Torah reading. The Torah reading gives you all the different elements of what will go into the tabernacle, almost all the different elements. Does anybody have a particular piece that they want to look at? No? Okay. So my suggestion is that we start from the top. The top is actually a very ringing and inspirational prologue, chapter 25, verse 1. And I'd like to have somebody read for us, please. Anybody raising their hand? Anybody secretly wanting to do it?
First. Sarita did it first.
Sarita beat you to it. That's right.
Duke you out.
Right. Okay.
Throw
Here
a
we
book
go.
at you.
Okay.
Rabbi, what does Terumah mean?
We're going to get to it in a half a second.
Okay, I will wait.
Okay, you can hear me?
Yeah.
The Lord spoke to Moses saying, tell the Israelite people to bring me gifts. You shall accept gifts from me from every person whose heart so moves him. And these are the gifts that you shall accept from them: gold, silver, and copper, blue, purple, and crimson yarns, fine linen, goat's hair, tanned ram skins, dolphin skins, and acacia wood, oil for lighting, spices for the anointing oil and for the aromatic incense, lapis lazuli and other stones for setting for the ephod and for the breastpiece, and let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them. Exactly as I show you, the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of all its furnishings, so shall you make it.
Okay. So that's the prologue. So the word Terumah, which is the word that gives our Torah portion its name, is the first word that comes up after it says God spoke to Moses, etc. That's pretty standard, conventional. We don't choose a word from there. Then it says Daber ben Israel, speak to the children of Israel, and they shall take for me Terumah. So the word here is translated, bring me gifts. Literally, the word Terumah comes from the root of Rome, to raise up, to elevate. So the idea of a Terumah is an uplifted gift, right? And a donation
Or an offering.
An offering. There you go, an uplifted offering. So to raise it up and here, give it. So this is now the call that, and the translation says, bring me gifts, plural. It doesn't say that in the Hebrew. It says, v'ikhu li Terumah, and they shall take for me a donation, an offering, a gift. So it doesn't say gifts. From each person whose heart so moves him, you shall take my Terumah. Okay, so that's the first line, and there's plenty for us to just dwell on just in these few words. I've pointed out many times that the tabernacle will be built. It will then have to be maintained, and of course, within the tabernacle will occur a whole set of rites, R-I-T-E-S, rituals, ceremonies, and so on. And they're all prescribed by the Torah, right? Last week was, right? Was it last week? Parashat Shkalim. Yes. So that was the week that we read. We're going to read it in 2 more weeks in the regular order. That once the tabernacle is going to be built, we all have to pay a tax. That's a mandatory tax for the upkeep of the tabernacle. That's the half shekel. So, and the fiscal year starts on the first day of Nisan, and the last Shabbat was the first day of Adar, a month before the new fiscal year. So, we're doing our pledge drive. We're doing everybody's, get everybody to put in their money. But that is the required contribution. That's your annual dues. Not sustaining share, annual required dues. But here, the tabernacle doesn't exist yet. In order to make the tabernacle a reality, God says, I can't make you do it. You have to want to do it. You have to generously be prompted by your heart to give of what you have in order to make this possible. Nobody is coerced. Nobody is done. Nobody is audited. So this is all about free will gifts. That's the basis for creating a sanctuary that afterwards we take responsibility for. There's a famous short story by Delmore Schwartz. He was a writer in the 50s. In dreams begin responsibilities. So the responsibilities come later, but first you have to dream. First you conceive of some beautiful vision, and then the reality sets in. So that's
Theodore Herzl.
Excuse me?
It's Theodore Herzl.
Different.
Theodore Herzl read that short story by Delmore Schwartz in the 50s. And then, 50 years later, 50 years earlier, he said, Im tirtzu ein zu agada. If you wish it, it is no legend, right? But that responsibility is more than that. If you wish it, then you can make it, but then what? To do a little editorial comment, we dreamed, we built, and now we're trashing it. We're not taking responsibility for what we built. So you have to keep on taking the responsibility. So here we're at that first stage. And the person who will be giving a gift, each person according to their own desire, right? That's why it's important to say the gift is in the single. Give anything you can. Give what you can. Give it Terumah. Raise up any small little gift that you can. If you can give more, great. That's whatever you can. Whatever your heart decides to give. Yidvenu libo. The word nidava, the word nadav is voluntary giving. So your heart wants to voluntarily give something. Another thing that's very important to understand here is that the human heart has been noticed by the Torah a number of times before this moment. We have the human heart introduced to us in the book of Genesis, where God says the human heart stinks. The human heart is just bad, bad, bad from morning till night. So God destroys the world, the flood story, and God says the same thing afterwards. He says, look, I really regret now that I had to go through this, but I have no illusions. The human heart is terrible. Nevertheless, I'm not going to destroy the world. So the beginning of our story says very bad things about the human heart. The next time that we, basically, I'm oversimplifying, but the next time that we seriously have any attention to the human heart is only a few weeks ago. Where did we have some serious attention to the human heart?
Pharaoh.
What?
Pharaoh,
With Pharaoh.
Pharaoh's heart.
Right.
Right.
So Pharaoh's heart, of course, without going into all the same stuff that we talk about so many times, who's hardening Pharaoh's heart? Certainly at the beginning, Pharaoh is hardening Pharaoh's heart. And again, we have this picture of a human heart that is the motivator for murder and oppression and fear-mongering and all that kind of stuff. It all comes out of Pharaoh's heart. So until now, we have almost without exception, whatever there is there's nothing to talk about. The human heart is the source of terrible things that human beings perpetrate. And now God says, you know what? There are undiscovered regions of goodness, of generosity in the human heart. And we're going to tap that part of the human heart that hasn't really come to the fore yet in order to create this sanctuary, in order to create this tabernacle. You have within you a heart that can be a giving heart, not a miserable, hating, fearful heart, but a heart that yidvenu libo, a heart that really wants to give. You have it. Now find out whether you have it. I'm not going to make your heart into a soft heart. I'm not going to force you to take this on. See if you can find whether you are such a person. And if you are, then we'll collect what we need to collect and we'll make a house of meeting so that the Asuli Mikdash, toward the end of this reading, in verse 8, you'll make a sanctuary for me, and then I will dwell within you. And then I'll be in your midst. So it all depends on this revolution of the heart. Right? Will people find this in their hearts or not? So in these very simple words, and then of course it goes right into very, very material stuff. The building of a sanctuary, of a tabernacle, is a physical endeavor. We need to get all the materials, but it's the giving that comes out of the heart. I'm willing to relinquish these things. I'm willing to give it for this cause. I'm willing to give it for something that stands for something really exciting for me to be part of. And on behalf of everybody else, right? This is not your 401k. Is that what it is? Is that what the retirement fund is? Right, this is for everybody besides you. Yeah, so I saw a couple of hands. Who's got their hand up? Yeah, Alan.
The bring me gifts, or it feels backwards in terms of, don't people give gifts as, in other words, it's like a taking of a gift as opposed to a giving of a gift. I mean, say to the people of Israel, doesn't say to the people they should give me a gift.
Correct.
But they say to the people of Israel that I should be brought a gift. There's kind of a backwardness here in the language.
Right. I think bring. You're right. I think bring would probably be is not the best translation.
But
Take,
even the Hebrew
accept.
word, but yichuli, it's like take for me,
right.
or accept for me.
What
as
do,
opposed
accept?
to,
That's right. What we're doing is
intending.
yes, you can't force anybody to give anything, but you better be ready with the box for the dollar bills when they come in, you better be ready with the pushka or with the thing, and you have to announce, okay, we're starting our campaign, we're opening our doors now, we're accepting your contributions. So that's the part where God is saying, okay, set this up, set up the campaign, but in terms of what's going to show up, we have no idea, right? We have no idea. However,
Good.
there is, like they do for, for wedding registers and so on, there's a register, right? No, we don't want your pet rat. Even though you love your pet rat so much, and that would be such a generous thing and such a heartfelt gift, that's not what we need.
They want the yarn instead that I spent spinning, but I don't know how anybody had time with the drop spindle, like while you're marching through the wilderness, to actually sit there and spin in these amazing colors. Like, so you have to have the dye, you have to have the wool. I mean, did they take this from the Egyptians? Was this one of the Egyptian gifts that's
All right,
already spun, or?
That's one of the classic questions. Here we are, we have this former slave population, and all of a sudden we've got all these luxury materials that we're putting on our wish list to receive. So where'd they get it from? Where did they get all this stuff? So we've in the past we've had some conversations about that, and if you look at where is it? Where is it? I distinctly remember that there's a comment with one of the midrashim. Yeah. If we turn to 493. So look at underneath the line, verse 15, which talks about the fact that this stuff is going to be the planks that make the walls of the Mishkan will be made out of acacia wood. So underneath the line, a comment on 15.
Why was the acacia tree chosen to be the exclusive source of wood for the ark and for the tabernacle? The Midrash suggests that it was chosen because it is not a fruit-bearing tree. God did not want to destroy the future fruit harvests of a tree, even to build the ark.
Okay, so that's one moral lesson we can take from this story. But now there's a little midrash, a little story that is told.
Where did these acacia trees come from? They are not native to the Sinai wilderness. Legend has it that the patriarch Jacob planted them on his way to Egypt, foreseeing that one day his grandchildren would need them. He did something of no immediate use to himself for the benefit of future generations.
Okay, so that's a very sweet midrash, which says, when we tell the story, sometimes we used it actually for our capital campaign years ago at Shomrei, that somebody was walking by and they saw this old man planting a carob tree, and they say, or a date tree, I forgot what, and they said, old man, you're planting this little sapling. Are you going to be able to eat the fruits? And he said, no, I won't. But just like I eat the fruits from the trees that my grandparents planted before me, I'm planting so that my grandchildren in the future can eat the fruits from this tree. So that's a similar situation here, where they imagine that the preparation for getting out of Egypt and for building a house for God was already literally planted in the consciousness of the Jewish people by their ancestors. This was part of the dreaming. Now, when the children of Israel are in Egypt, what sustained them? What kept them going? Because they remember the promise. There was a promise. Remember, God made the promise to the patriarchs, and the patriarchs made it to their children, and the children passed it on to the next generation. Everybody was constantly pushing along the dream that they would get out. So the getting ready for it, is part of this story. So where do they come from? A person socked away a little acacia plant or plank over here and over there, maybe. The same story is given about the song at the Red Sea. Right, so Moses leads the Israelites in singing. So singing, that's fine. but just to give a kind of a spoiler alert for when we do our March 7th do-it-yourself program. Miriam leads the women in song and dance with instruments. Where'd they get the instruments from? The Midrash says because Miriam was very smart. Miriam understood, hey, we're going to get out of here and we want to be able to celebrate. We're going to take timbrels with us. We're going to take this stuff along with us and not just be empty-handed when we want to celebrate and we want to sing for joy. So planning ahead, thinking about the bigger picture and thinking, I guess, back to the idea of a generous heart. This is also part of what it means to think with a generous heart, to think in that kind of really open-ended way to say, well, what can we do to make it when we finally get to that point as beautiful, as full as possible? So all of those examples, are in the Midrash.
Another comment about that. I think about here's a group of people, they've been enslaved. They've probably had very, very little. They've owned very, very little. And now they are being, asked to give up material things that they have accumulated. And I think about, I remember my grandparents talking about, the Depression, and, you'd have things and you wouldn't, worrying about giving them up. I actually saw that my mother's family was middle class and really didn't experience the Depression that much, but my father's family was really poor. And you could see, throughout their lives that my mother had a really much easier time giving things. She loved, one of her favorite things was to give things to people, to give everything away. And my father really struggled with that. And I think about that in this context here of these people who didn't have. And now how, opening themselves up to the experience of being able to share.
Right. A tremendous emotional challenge.
Yeah.
My mother was super, super poor growing up in the Depression. Their family almost had literally nothing. And one of the things that she used to tell me, and I remember the way she did it, she would say that if anybody had a piece of candy, like all the entire block would flock around, and everybody would all of a sudden be your best friend because you had a piece of candy. And then the question was, everybody wanted a bite, a lick, something from this piece of candy. Everybody was desperate. Everybody was so poor. And she would say that if this was like the candy bar, right? She said you would hold it like this, right? The rest of the candy bar is over here. You would hold it and say, okay, yeah, here, take a bite. So you would like control, that so that they could, just take the tiniest nibble. So you were sharing it, but you'd be damned if you were going to get somebody take a big bite out of it, for sure. Yeah, Marty, you wanted to say something?
For once in my life, no.
Okay, I thought you raised your hand. Okay, so yeah, so this is definitely in a very low-keyed way bringing up a huge challenge for the people. If it's hard for us to part with our precious things in general, here it would be really even more difficult on all these levels. And going back to the practical question, where would they even have this stuff from? Where would they have it to be able to then wonder whether they should give it or not? So one thing I said was, here and there you sock away something. But there's a standard answer. And the simple standard answer that many people give is that if we remember the Exodus story, as we're leaving Egypt, we're being, getting a friendly push out the door, but with gifts that are given to us by the Egyptians. That every neighbor would give the Israelite that's leaving, here, take this gold silverware, take this pitcher, take this shawl, take this ball of wool, take. So for many people, that's the simplest way of understanding that that's how people could find all of these objects.
In the
But-
Exodus story, they were called borrowings.
Yeah, I was just looking for that. I just found it.
Right.
In the, on page 387, talks about the Israelites had done Moses' bidding and borrowed from the Egyptians objects of silver and gold and clothing. Yeah.
Right. So that's the one that's a translation of Vayishalu, right? So that could be borrowed. It could be they asked, right? Or it could be the opposite. You know, people sometimes don't like to take, right? Even when they deserve it. So you give somebody something, you press it upon them, you push it into their hand, you close their hand around the thing, and the person feels a little embarrassed about it. And what do they say? I'll pay you back. I'll give it back to you then, the next time I see you, or something like that. It's a kind of a face-saving convention. Everybody knew that they weren't borrowing it. So some people like to say, oh, look at those nefarious Israelites. They lied and schemed and cheated, and they said they were only borrowing it. I think that the story, bears a different way of understanding it. So that's one explanation. If you take that more open-hearted way of looking at it, it still then brings up another part. One of the back to where is it? 387, you said?
Yeah, and actually on 388, there's a very interesting explanation below the line.
Right. So
387 and 388.
Right. So first of all, the next verse says, "Vashem natan et chen ha'am be'inei Mitzrayim," and God had disposed the Egyptians favorably toward the people. So, and we talked about this many other times before, that the giving is not grudging, but there's a kind of a sense of chen, of charm, of grace, of goodwill. And it says it earlier, where does it say it before that? Anyway, the point is it says shchenta. It says that each person should take from their neighbor, which gives us a whole tantalizing hint. Were the Jews living in a ghetto? Were they living in a work camp? What does it mean that they had a neighbor? So I don't want to go into all of that, but I do want to say that this opens up the question, along with the chen terminology. The fact that the Israelites were oppressed and enslaved, as we should know very well, doesn't mean that every single Egyptian hated the Israelites and beat them, over their head and treated them terribly. This, opens the idea that there could have been some very good relationships between individual Israelites and individual Egyptians who weren't necessarily the people that were calling the shots and deciding policy.
Perhaps they
But
were
then-
offering reparations.
That's another issue. I spoke about reparations last week. Reparations is definitely, morally an important issue to think about. And the Torah talks about sending out slaves with gifts.
That's what the comment does on 388. It
Right.
says, this practice of the Egyptians sending the Israelites off with gifts of gold and jewels anticipates the law in Deuteronomy that one who frees a slave
Right,
must not send him or her away empty-handed.
right. Ha'anek ta'aniklo. You have to grant them a gift. But that's what all of this is now, a zigzaggy way of then coming to the point of, if I get a gift from this Egyptian, if I get, you know, a piece of, you know, a gold trinket, there's, you know, the word in English that I'm thinking of is a keepsake, right? There would be a tremendous, if there is this kind of connection between me and the person who gave me this gift, there would be a tremendous tendency or temptation, if you want to call it that, to want to hold on to it forever, to want to keep it as an heirloom in the family, to say, you know, this is something, you know, Zecher Litziat Mitzrayim, as a remembrance of going out of Egypt, you know, here, you know, there were some really good Egyptians back then. Listen, look at what my neighbor, you know, Merneptah, you know, gave me. So the goodness of heart of the Egyptian, if we read it that way, is now brought up. We never really paid attention to it before, but now it's brought up as then the challenge to the Israelite. Will you now give up this piece that was originally given up by somebody else? Right? So, you know, what's called the, you know, I don't know, paying it forward or something, right? Will you do that? The Egyptian parted with something, and think about the Egyptian. The Egyptian parted with something that was maybe something that was a piece of garbage, or was it something that was, you know, of value to them? And they gave it to you. So now what? Are you ready to give it now for this idea, for this project? This is part of what's going on here. So now we have all these different materials. So we'll skip all of those details, and then we have in verse 6, shemen lamaor, oil for lighting. It doesn't just say shemen, right? We don't want cooking oil, right? We don't want engine oil. We don't want, you know, cosmetic oils. We want, because oil was, of course, a basic staple of that whole region. You know, oil was all over the place. You used oil for so many different things. So this is specifically, we want oil for lighting. In the other things, it doesn't say, and gold for the ark, or whatever, right? It doesn't say the purpose for the other materials until this point. Here it says the oil, this is the kind of oil, right? The spices, we don't want the spices to make a good, you know, steak for God. It should be tasty. We want spices that are going to be specifically for the anointing oil and for the incense. Okay, then we have verse 7. We have semi-precious stones that will be for the ephod and the choshen. The ephod and the choshen mean, as it says here, the ephod. That's the translation we have. The English translation of ephod is ephod. And the choshen is the breast piece or the breastplate. The ephod is a kind of an apron-y cloak. And people understood what that was as an item that was out there, right? So even though they don't know how exactly it's going to play a role in what's happening with the tabernacle per se, but they know that these are things that people wear. So those are the kinds of stones we need for that. And then finally, we have this, you know, the conclusion, verse 8, the famous verse, V'asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocha. Somebody want to give us a little bit of an you know, a commentary on verse 8?
The striking thing about it is that is the grammar. It says it's giving all these instructions for creating the tabernacle, and then it says you create a tabernacle, and you expect it to say, and I will dwell in it, but it doesn't. It says I will dwell with them.
Yeah, make it, yeah, say explicit, right? It doesn't say I will dwell. They'll make me a sanctuary, mikdash, from the word kadosh, holy, sacred. So they will make me a sacred place or a sacred structure, a mikdash. The temple is called a Beit HaMikdash, the house of sanctity, the sanctuary. They'll make me such a sanctuary, v'shachanti, and I will dwell betocham. It doesn't say, and I will dwell in it. Right, what Michael is pointing out. It doesn't say in it, it says in them. In them. They, the ones who make the sanctuary, will become, not the sanctuary will be God's house, but they will be the containers, the vessels of God's presence. I will be dwelling in them. So this is, something that's been noticed again and again and again. So the idea of the action is super important. The result of the action is not to create a fetish or a token. It's to create an experience, and that experience is well. Let's think about it just a little bit more carefully. How long will God's dwelling last within them?
for 40 years.
40 years?
As long as they're giving and as long as they're seeking them. As long as you're bringing these Terumot, as long as you're giving of your heart.
Right. So it's of course, it doesn't say, right? It doesn't say you'll do this and then you'll get this amazing, or orgasmic feeling of spiritual uplift, right? Wow. And then it's over. That's not what it says, right? And then you'll behold my presence. And as a result, it says, and then I will dwell among them. Right? How long will God dwell among them? That who knows? It's sort of like maybe I will start dwelling among them, and then we'll see what happens. Right? Or I will continuously, forever dwell among them as long as that mikdash is there. Right? Or is it as long as your hearts are open? All of these are possibilities.
It doesn't specifically though indicate how anyone who's not present at that time, right, would be affected and involved, right? It seems very immediate, but it sort of can't be, right? It has to extend beyond the immediate people who are doing this.
Right. So let's get back to that first stuff that I was saying about what's the voluntary stage and then what's the responsibility stage. Right? The voluntary stage is here. This is the beginning. This is where the sanctuary is initiated, where the process has to have a start someplace. And that start is here. But then the keeping it going, it's not, okay, now tear down the sanctuary and now let's see if anybody wants to build a new sanctuary. No, the sanctuary is meant to stand and continue to stand, but the only way it can stand is with the obligatory involvement of people. So the dream has to be regenerated by obligation, right? The same way that we said that the dream is kept alive before by generations of Israelites, but now it's actually come true. And that's always the question. Once a dream is achieved, then what? How do you keep it going? How do you keep the excitement going? How do you keep the glow, the inspirational quality of the dream? How do you keep that perpetuated? So the Torah's answer is you make people invest in it and tell them, you have to keep this going. This is your job. And then everything else around it. Tell the stories. Explain what's going on. Do. Various things 3 times a year. Come to the sanctuary to see God and to be seen by God. So if somebody says, why do I have to do this for? The answer is, this is what it is. Well, it doesn't mean anything to me. That's going to be a problem, right? You create the culture as strongly as you can. And what the Torah knows, again and again, starting from before, but also right here. You can't make anybody feel anything or even do anything so that they will feel something, but you can try, right? You can try to set up that as a system, right? That's what culture is. That's what it means to create a culture where, certain values just get integrated naturally into the rhythm of living. Okay.
If I take the sentence as a standalone, verse 8, nothing about verse 8 says to build me a dwelling. Nothing about verse 8 talks about, a specific location. It talks about just a presence or a relationship.
A mikdash literally means.
But you're missing the word bait.
Structure.
But you're missing the word bait.
No, the word a mikdash is in and of itself, a sanctuary. The word Beit HaMikdash means the building that was the sanctuary. Why are we singling it out? Because it got destroyed a couple of times, right? Bayit Rishon, Bayit Sheni, right? But the Mikdash part of it was the designation. This is the sacred place. What we have here, of course, is a place that's not a place, right? Because the tabernacle is not going to occupy a designated place in geography. It's going to move around, right? As we continue reading, it's going to be made prefab, right? So it's going to be made with these pieces that you put them together, you take them apart, you put them together, you move over to the next place, you set it up again. So it's a sanctuary, but it's not a set geographic location for sure. But the word mikdash always, conveys. And look, again, you want to take it separate? You can't. Here it is. We're going to now do the following. V'yasu means make something physical. The next verse 10. V'yasu aron. Let them make an ark. Let them make a menorah. Let them make walls for the tabernacle and so on. It's very clear that we're talking about something very physical. And yet, in the end, the promise is not ultimately God's indwelling in that physical structure, but in us. But God's dwelling will actually be in the physical thing. I give it away at the very end of the book of Exodus. It actually does happen, that it's bitocho. Right. It is actually in the mikdash, but that's not what God is saying here is the main idea.
But even if that wasn't the case, that may be what people need, that people would need something tangible like that, as this is where God lives. The concept of, God living within us and among us and, and such, perhaps is harder. It's easier to sort of conceptualize if there's this physical place.
Right. Yeah. Let's look at the last verse for the last couple of minutes that we have. What does verse 9 say one more time?
Exactly as I show you the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of all its furnishings, so shall you make it.
Okay. And what does that tell us? That Moses was shown pictures. Moses was shown images of the tabernacle, how it should be laid out, how everything should be. The rest of what we have is a text. It'll tell you that the ark should be so many cubits tall and so many cubits wide. and this should be made out of acacia wood, and this should be made out of hammered metal, and so on. But it never actually tells you. It's very limited in how to describe it. Now, what did the menorah or what did the ark actually really look like? So God says in this verse, I have shown it to you, right? I showed it to you. What does it say? Where? I don't know. Later on it says, I showed it to you on the mountain. Here's it's just like I've shown it to you. The blueprints, the illustrations, they're all missing. We don't have them. We have a few illustrations in the back of our Eitz Chaim Chumash. If you have that, you can look. And for just a minute or two, I'm gonna try to do a little screen sharing, but in order to do that, I have to first pull some stuff up. Okay, so give me a half a second, please. And I'm gonna,
Rabbi,
yes.
it's 26 verse 30, then set up the tabernacle according to the manner of it that you were shown on the mountain.
Thank you. See, oh, you guys are the best. Thank you, Lynn. Now, where did I do? There you are. So now I'm going to screen share. Just as a, okay, can you see this?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, we can see it.
So this is a page from an illuminated manuscript from about 1300, even a little earlier, in Spain, in Aragon. And it says on the top, we didn't get to this part, but it says, "V'zeh ma'aseh hamenorah, miksha zahav ad reicha," and then it goes down the side, the side down here, ad pircha, etc., 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 right? And then, right, asher her'a et Moshe, just like God showed Moses, kein asat hamenorah, right? And so did he make the menorah. Of course, he supervised it. So here's the menorah right here. And it's got, you know, the implements for putting in the oil and lighting it. These are steps to go up on top. There are the lights of the menorah, the flames, right? This is the ark. So here's the box of the ark. Obviously, this is not photorealism, but this gives you the tablets that are inside the ark. There's Anochi from the 10 Commandments. If you go down here, it says Zachor, Shamor, both versions of the 10 Commandments for the mitzvah of Shabbat. So the 10 Commandments are inside the box. Then there's a golden lid, and then there are the cherubs, the winged cherubs that are on the sides of the ark. It says, you know, Shnei Kruvim or Sim Knafayim, etc. This is the table for the bread, right? And these are the you know, like the trowels to take the bread in and out of the shelves. We have 6 loaves on this side, 6 loaves on that side, a very strange kind of table. And this is, first of all, this is, I'm trying to, unfortunately, it's a little blurry. Let me see it for a half a second in another, I have my own hard copy. Right, oh, how could I forget? This comes from before the story of make a canister of manna and put it into the ark. So here's the canister of manna. And this, it says, is mateh, believe me, a staff. And this says mateh, and this is a staff. What's the difference between this staff and this staff? This is a plain staff, and this is a flowering staff, right? We have that story later on, right? When Aaron's staff miraculously flowered, and then they put it into the Mishkan as a perpetual testimony to God's miracles. So this page is a page in a Bible, a Spanish Jewish illuminated Bible. And the idea was, just like God showed Moses these diagrams, as we enter into the Bible, we're shown these visions of these sacred implements of the Mishkan. And as I said, we're going to be able to continue talking about the Mishkan for weeks. So I look forward to that conversation continuing. We're going to
But
stop.
not next week.
But not next week. Yes, next week is Purim. Everybody's invited to celebrate Purim together. Okay, no joke. Okay, sei gesinnt.